Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. I want to talk to you tonight about an inconvenient truth. I think this will keep you up at night. You might not want to listen to it. It's a fairly long article. It was originally published, at least parts of it, at Activist Post. ChristianHeadlines.com got permission to repost it. And I want to share it with you. It seems, according to the Christian Post, that the National Institutes of Health, which is an advisory board established by President Trump to review applications for federal funding for projects, ordered the policy of using fetal tissue from aborted babies to be discontinued. Not sure I knew that was even happening. But now, under Democrat rule, this policy has been abandoned. Under Trump administration, the Independent Ethics Board reviewed applications for National Institutes of Health grants. But now it seems HHS is reversing that 2019 decision, specifically in regard to research applications for NIH grants and contracts proposing the use of human fetal tissue for elective abortions. Now each case is going to be reviewed by an ethics advisory board. This is a huge step backward. In response, the National Right to Life Committee called the change a sickening decision by the Biden administration. Carol Tobias, president of National Right to Life, said in a statement, quote, "Tiny human babies are aborted by abortionists and then exploited to be farmed for their organs and tissue for use in experiments." She went on to say the Biden administration and HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra have dismantled the process of making researchers meet any ethical standards when it comes to harvesting the body parts. In a statement, Representative Susan Delbene, Mark Ponson, and Jan Schakowsky said they applauded the change in policy to reverse the Trump administration's arbitrary barriers to both extramural and intramural researchers on the use of fetal tissue in scientific research, end of quote. Did you notice the word arbitrary? It's used as if it had no substance, no value, no purpose at all. Previously, the Ethics Board had reviewed 14 research proposals that would have used fetal tissue. The Ethics Board only approved one of the 14. Conservatives believe in limited government, truly free markets, individual liberty, the value of life, freedom of speech, private property rights, the right of self-defense, the right of self-determination, freedom of religion, and the non-aggression principle, meaning we won't harm you unless you try to harm us. None of these ideals can exist in a globalist world because globalism is at its core the pursuit of a fully centralized tyranny. The reality? There are people on this planet not satisfied to merely live their lives, take care of their families, and make their mark peacefully. They crave power over all else. They desperately want control over you, over me, over everything, and they will use any means at their disposal to get it. The author of this piece compares it to a kind of drug addiction. Globalists, he says, are like crack addicts. They can never get enough power. There's always something more to take. They tell themselves and others that they know what's best for the rest of us, that they are philanthropists. They believe themselves superior, and therefore it is their destiny to dictate and micromanage society for the greater good of us all. But when we witness their methods, it becomes clear that their aspirations are far from being noble. Unfortunately for the globalists, the reset is not working out so well. In the U.S., the agenda is failing miserably compared to Asia and parts of Europe. As the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab is so fond of reminding us, the COVID pandemic is the perfect opportunity to push forward the globalist plans for a total reset of human economy and society. To the globalists, the crisis is a panacea, a doorway to their version of a better world. They love the pandemic. They're not distressed at all by it. The problem is, it's not doing enough damage, nor is it terrifying enough people. The author then compares our pandemic with something called Event 201. Apparently, according to this article, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ran a coronavirus simulation just 2 months before the real thing hit. They reported their findings to the World Economic Forum. A coincidence? What did they discover? A cure? No. A way for elites to keep the public under control. Not a way to combat, defeat a disease. Why not? Apparently that's not what they were looking for. What they discovered was that dissenting voices needed to be silenced if the reset is going to prevail. One factor within the Event 201 simulation that never played out, though, was the World Economic Foundation's projections of deaths. The war game suggested at least 65 million initial deaths due to the pandemic. Early projections on the death rate suggested 2% to 3% of the population or more. The same projections were repeated by the UN's World Health Organization when the real pandemic was first revealed to the public. So what has been the result? Well, the death rate is far less. It's not more than 0.26% outside of nursing homes, just over 25%. So now what? Well, instead of backing off the reset scheme, the globalists are continuing to double down. This is largely because they have no other choice. They let the cat out of the bag, and individuals like Klaus Schwab told the world exactly what the plan is. If they retreat now, they might never get another chance to implement a world centralization plan, a massive grift which requires medical tyranny in order to prevent rebellion. You see, if the death rate had been dramatically higher than 0.26%, then maybe a larger portion of the U.S. population would have been on board with longer-term restrictions and medical passports. Maybe not. But the fact remains that 40% of deaths have been in nursing homes among patients with pre-existing illnesses. The death rate outside of these facilities is minimal. The fear narrative is falling apart. States across the country are opening and are refusing to implement useless mandates. 40 to 50% of the U.S. population in polls are refusing to comply with the vaccine rollout or medical passports. Why take a vaccine for a virus that 99.7% of the population is unaffected by? The author says, don't be surprised if there's more engineering chaos going into the summer months. But what will the next crisis look like? He thinks we already see some signs. COVID mutations. The mainstream media is pushing a non-stop narrative of COVID mutation hype. We hear about the UK and Brazilian variants on a weekly basis, and the assertion has been that surely these variants will be more infectious and more deadly than the original. But what if this doesn't happen? Well, the globalists don't really care. They only are concerned with planting the idea in our heads. They only care about reigniting the fear. So what else is tearing us apart? Well, the answer is rioting in the streets. A black man died at the hands, the knee of a white police officer. What about the white officer who shot and killed the 14-year-old black youth? It wasn't racism. It was about kill or be killed. The boy had a gun, which the film clearly shows him discarding. But he does it just as he turns to face the officer. She, however, does not see that furtive gesture. It was dark. Knowing he had the gun, seeing the gun, and turning as he did, with his hands coming up, she thought, gun, and a 14-year-old boy was dead. The question becomes, what's he doing out at that time of night with a gun? The answer doesn't really matter, apparently. She killed him. She's a white woman. Therefore, it's not only murder, it's racism. Now, the event had nothing to do with racism, had nothing to do with police brutality. But that's not the thing that's going to stop the BLM or anybody else from taking advantage and making it an all about white supremacy. Since writing this article, another police officer shot and killed a girl who was going after another girl with a knife. So that is now more police brutality. The question becomes, when do we get down to martial law? The serious rioting occurs in Democrat-held cities, largely. The liberal philosophy cares nothing about law and order, only fairness, equality, and justice. So keep your eyes open. The next World Economic Forum simulation event in July will be something called Cyber Polygon. Cyber Polygon is a war game being held by the WEF this July, which is meant to simulate a major cyber attack on the global supply chain and the economic system. There has been endless discussion in the media this past year, building up fears of cyber attacks by Russia or China or Iran and even North Korea. Are you paying any attention? Today there are renewed tensions between Iran and Israel and continued destabilization in Syria. All this along with the rising danger of confrontation with China over Taiwan. War could be the goal, or merely economic conflict. China has already been dumping dollars in U.S. treasuries the past year, and it would not take much to cause damage to the dollar's world reserve status if China and Russia both diversified into a basket of currencies for global trade. We talked about that last week, China's cyber currency. Strategists theorize about American men kept from rebelling in the streets by drafting them into the armed forces. That way they can be taken out of the mix and may even die in a meaningless war somewhere overseas. But what is actually certain? What's certain is that America is the primary target. Globalists need the U.S. out of the way if they're going to make the progress they want, the progress they need. A single dramatic attack or a series of lesser crises to keep us busy, wear us down. The current administration is running up the debt, over $28 trillion, and growing $100,000 every 3 to 5 seconds. The bottom line, America is the primary target of the globalists because we are one of the only countries with the means and the numbers to stop them and to stop the reset. Until they are removed from the equation, they will continue to throw crisis after crisis at us in order to wear us down and force us to accept totalitarianism. Did you notice how consistent the Democrats were when Donald Trump was president? They never let up. They kept coming at him any way they could, every way they could. It was wearisome. America represents the only significant obstacle to their agenda. Americans with conservative American Christian ideals. Reality? You cannot have an openly globalist society and conservative ideals at the same time in the same place. It's just not possible.